museum again, and I'm here to give you virtual tour number 2 of our Butler Blackhawk biplane. Try saying that 3 times quickly. This plane might look familiar if you've seen our other video about our red 1929 Stearman. That plane was designed by Lloyd Stearman, a really famous airplane manufacturer, and this airplane was designed by his brother Waverly Stearman. It's on long-term loan to the museum from one of our board members, Kent McMakin, who restored it, and it is the only flying version of this airplane in existence in the world. It's from Kansas City. It has a remarkable history. Let's look around and learn about it. Look at this beautiful propeller. All these old airplanes have wonderful handcrafted wooden propellers. I think they're so lovely. They're stacked out of multiple pieces of wood and then glued together, varnished, carved, carefully balanced, and then mounted on the prop spinner. This one is made out of wood, and then there's a giant attachment, a giant nut kind of to hold the propeller in, and then we cap it all off with what some people call a beanie cap, which just makes me think of headwear, but it covers the front of the propeller, and it does 2 things. It looks really cool, and it directs the air over here to the cylinders, which is really important because this engine is air-cooled. This is a Wright J5 engine, which was a really common engine in airplanes in the late 20s and up until the 30s. It's a radial engine, which means that these cylinders, these are cylinders, sometimes we call them jugs, they stick right out into the air. That struck me as really weird when I first saw it. Why is part of the engine just like sticking out where it can get rained on and be hit by bugs when you're flying? But it's really important that they stay cool, otherwise they overheat, they can explode. It has 9 cylinders, so all the way around the engine here we have these 9 cylinders sticking out, and inside the cylinders are the pistons, and they turn the crankshaft, which turns the propeller and makes the whole thing go. Look at this giant wheel. It's like bigger than I am. Now, you and I don't see wheels like this out and about in modern day very often, but back in the 20s and 30s, a lot of automobiles had car wheels similar to this. So it was a stylistic choice kind of, but it was also really practical because these planes were designed to land on rough fields, on grass runways, short runways, and they needed something big like this to get through all that grass. So this is one of the 3 runways that we have at the Brodhead Airport, and it is all grass, no pavement in sight. There is not a paved runway at the Brodhead Airport, and this is very much like airports and runways would have been like in the 20s and 30s during the golden age of aviation, and what our planes here in this collection are mostly designed to fly out of. To start this airplane, you would go into the cockpit and then turn the ignition on, and then you come out here and turn the propeller like so. And when you turn that inside the engine, that would cause the spark plugs to spark, and then presumably your engine would start. To do this shot, we made sure that the ignition was switched off. Don't want that starting, but it's important around old airplanes to be really careful and be aware that, in theory, if you turned the propeller, it could start, so you don't want to be in the way of the propeller. You don't want to mess around with that. Also notice how this propeller is really high up off the ground here, and that's why we have those big wheels. It's important to keep the front of the plane and the propeller up so it has clearance in case there's tall grass and you're trying to take off. The grass was longer then. We have several Butler buildings built by Butler Manufacturing here on the airport. This is one of them. It was built around the same time as the Butler Blackhawk, and it has the same Butler Manufacturing sign. So now we have like matching airplanes and hangars, which is cool. So this plane was built in 1929 in Kansas, and then in the 40s it was used as instructors' training plane. So instructors who needed time in this kind of airplane to figure out how to teach other people were learning in it. And then in the later 40s, it was owned by a man named Don McMakin, who had been one of the instructors. One day he took his young wife, Ruth, up for a flight. She also knew how to fly. And he was in the back seat where the pilots sit, and she was up here. Welcome to the passenger cockpit. If you were to take a ride today, you would have these lovely shoulder straps so you can't slip out the top. And then they hook down into a lap belt here, and it just latches together. Click! And then you're pretty secure, you can't wiggle out. However, way back in the 40s, you just had this lap belt, or not this lap belt, but you know what I mean. Don flew up into a loop-the-loop, and Ruth, who is sitting in the front, when they reached the top, the airplane kind of stalled, and Ruth just slipped up out of the cockpit and sort of landed with her shoulders on the upper wing. So we don't do that anymore. But she didn't die. Then the airplane kind of nosed out of that, and she slipped back into the cockpit, and then they landed and lived happily ever after, and they had a kid named Kent. So in 1947, Don McMakin sold this airplane so that he could have the $350 that it made to build his first house for himself and his family. So the airplane kind of disappeared. We don't know exactly where it went, and then later in the 70s, Don's son, Kent, was really interested in airplanes, and he wondered what had happened to this plane that had been in his family. Couldn't find it anywhere, figured it must have been destroyed or lost or crashed. Then in the 90s, it kind of showed up in a barn. It was just in pieces, and together Don and Kent restored it to its beautiful glory today, and it is the only flying version of this airplane. There were 11 made, maybe only 9 made, we're not entirely sure. And then the only other version of this airplane that actually exists present day is hanging up in a museum in Kansas City where Butler manufactured these airplanes. You can see this beautiful Butler Blackhawk logo. I just love that. It was hand painted. So if you like this video series, please stick around. We're going to be showing you a bunch of other airplanes in our collection, also a lot of other details. So if you have questions about anything you see here on this airplane, on a different airplane, or there is an airplane in our collection that you'd like to see a video about, let us know, say hi, and also please donate $1, $5, $10, or $1 million. It helps us keep building our new museum so we can open the doors to the public and have people like you come visit us, and it also funds my salary, the maintenance on airplanes like this, pretty much everything. So money is the key. See you later. I just made a mistake. Oh man, wet pants.